On today's episode, conservation initiatives in Steele Creek Park. Welcome back to the Steele Creek Explorer. I'm your host, Jeremy Stout. And you might remember a few months ago, we introduced you to some of the major threats facing biodiversity in the world, but also locally and in Steele Creek Park. Those four big categories were global climate change, overharvesting, introduced species, and habitat loss or degradation. You might also remember on the last episode, we took you behind the scenes and showed you a research project that was happening here at the Nature Center. And I said that over the next couple of episodes, I was going to continue to take you behind closed doors and show you some of those back of house activities that happen at the Nature Center. So on today's episode, that's what I want to do, to talk about conservation efforts that are happening at the Nature Center. Well, this space may not look like much right now, and it is very much a work in progress, but I am very excited to tell you about what this space is going to be when we finish. I am standing in the Nature Center's research and collections space. So collections tie in closely to conservation efforts. In fact, I dare say curating this space is going to be one of the most important things that the Nature Center can do to engage in conservation efforts in the park and in the region. So what is a collection space? Museums and nature centers around the world maintain collections of important specimens and artifacts from specific groups of plants or animals or specific groups of people. Well, here at the Nature Center, we have thousands of specimens of rocks, minerals, fossils, plants, and animals. And until now, those are specimens that we have not had an adequate place to store and curate. And collections are so important because they provide a baseline for current and future researchers to be able to compare and identify and understand what is in the park, what is in the region. So what I'm holding here is just a tiny fraction of just one of our collections, the insect collection. But you can see how they are cataloged and classified and organized by family and by group. And in this space, we will be able to have a space that's available to the public sometimes, but also is going to be open to scientists and researchers to study organisms and groups of natural history specimens in the park and beyond. Very exciting. Well, it might be hard to believe, but this is the species I'm going to use as an example on why it's so important to keep good records of plants and animals that are found in a given region. This is the turtle that is most commonly known and loved by many of us. You're probably familiar with this turtle growing up. This is the eastern box turtle or common box turtle. This is the only turtle that we have in our region that lives on land exclusively. And it seems fairly common, but would you believe me if I told you that it is actually an imperiled species? What makes conservation initiatives so important and what's so scary about this individual turtle is that its numbers have been in decline for many years. In fact, its reproductive success has been lowering in recent decades. But because the turtle is so long-lived, members of this species can live to be over 100 years old, maybe much more than that. We don't even know how long they can live. Changes to their population may not be visible for many decades until after it happens. So it's hard to believe because we do still find this turtle commonly in our woods, but it is imperiled. So keeping track of where they are when we see them, and especially keeping track of their nesting records, is a vitally important conservation initiative for this species and many like it. Well, another important conservation initiative in any setting is providing adequate nesting sites for birds and other animal species. So many birds have suffered as a result of the invasive exotic species, the European starling. That's a bird that was introduced here in the early 1900s and it's quickly taken over, and it's an aggressive cavity nester. That means it nests inside holes in trees and other structures. So one thing that we do throughout the city of Bristol is that the Nature Center coordinates the establishment of nesting boxes for eastern bluebirds, American kestrels, eastern screech owls, and the purple martins like you see above me. Well, birds aren't the only group of animals that we can help by putting up nest boxes for. Believe it or not, native bee hotels like the one behind me are vitally important to plant conservation. There's this terrible myth that I hear all the time at the Nature Center, and that's this horrible idea that somehow honeybees are the only good pollinators. And honeybees are great pollinators. They deserve the positive praise that they get. But we have many, many, many native species of bees, and especially wasps. Yes, there are many wasps that are important pollinators to our region. Many of those are cavity nesters, and you can buy or make specially designed structures like the one behind me. They don't have to be huge like the one behind me. This is one of 3 that was provided to us by area naturalist Cade Campbell. But you can also find these in smaller sizes that could just go on a porch or a patio. And this is a wonderful way to help native insects and also the plants that depend on them for pollination. Well, believe it or not, Steele Creek Park is actually growing. Today, the park is an almost 2,300 acre biological preserve with a 15-mile perimeter. But when the park first opened many years ago, it actually was less than 800 acres in size. We've been able to increase the preserved area, the natural area, by over double over the years. Most recently, a parcel of 7 acres was purchased for us by the Friends of Steele Creek Nature Center and Park. They were instrumental in preserving a small acreage, but that was a pivotal piece for the protection of a rare species that calls Steele Creek Park home, the Tennessee dace. So while I'm talking about the Friends organization, I want to pay special attention to them. The Friends of Steele Creek Nature Center and Park, we've introduced you to them before. They're a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to the mission of the Nature Center. So sometimes that means fundraising for the awesome exhibits that we've shown you in the Nature Center, but also the conservation initiatives that I'm talking about today. So whether it's invasive species eradication and removal, park litter pickup and cleanup, or acquiring new properties that increase the size of the park, I recommend the Friends of Steele Creek Nature Center and Park and want to thank them and invite you to get involved with their organization. Well, thanks so much for going along with me today as I showed you just a small handful of a few of the conservation efforts that are happening at the Nature Center. But what I would really like to do is invite you to get involved. There are infinite ways that you can help species right here in our area. You don't even have to leave your own home. You can put up nesting boxes for birds and insects. You can help leave any place better and cleaner than you find it by cleaning up litter if you find it in the park or in your neighborhood or community. You can join the Friends. As I mentioned earlier, they're engaged in essentially all of our projects and activities at the Nature Center, and they're always looking for fresh new members to help with that mission. You can also get online. Apps like iNaturalist, or for younger folks, iSeek. Those are wonderful nonprofit apps that allow you to share and identify the species that you find in your own backyard or right here at Steele Creek Park. But wherever you are, be sure to visit Steele Creek Park, because here's where you can be the explorer.